Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to come from the 6th chapter in the book of Revelation. And beginning in the 4th chapter, John, who is physically transplanted on the Roman Empire's penal colony of Patmos, which is an isolated island somewhere in the Mediterranean near the Aegean Sea. It was 6 miles by 10 miles, and that's where they sent prisoners. And John was there because of his confession of faith, and he maintained the resurrection that all the others had died for by this point. He is the last one left, last one living. And after addressing 7 real churches, he is, beginning in the 4th chapter, he is transplanted. He's physically in Patmos, but transplanted into a heavenly vision in the heavenly throne room. This is the sacred of sacreds, no less. There he meets 24 elders and 4 living creatures, both of whom exist to give a ministry of perpetual praise in that heavenly throne room. Then in the 5th chapter, which is a lot more relevant to the 6th we'll be covering, we read of a scroll written inside and back having been sealed with 7 seals in the first number. So a scroll, some translations translate it as book of life, book of remembrance. So this book or scroll has salvific significance, but I think the scroll is the more appropriate word because there were no books pre-printing age. The ancients physically, manually copied their items on scrolls that could be rolled up. And there's an angel cries out, who among anyone in the earth, anyone under the earth, above the earth, is worthy to open? There was none. And then John weeps in the 4th verse, and I wept because no one was found worthy. So he thinks that he knows the significance of what's held in those seals and their significance as it pertains to the end times, and he thinks that there is no one who is able to open them. And then he is given the answer, the Lion from the tribe of Judah, who is the Messiah, the root of David, the Messiah, and his worthiness is established by the prayer of the 4 living creatures. We read of these in Revelation 4:7. They're likened to a lion, a calf, or an ox, and a man and an eagle. And what they say, and they sang to renew song, saying, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain and have redeemed us to Yahweh by your blood, out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation." So his worthiness to open, his unique qualification is lies on the foundational fact that he was slain, and in being so slain, he accomplished our redemption. He became our atonement, capital letter A, the uniquely sufficient one for all time, and his blood cleanses us. John writes in chapter 1, verse 7 of the first epistle, which bears his name, cleanses us from all iniquity. And that's the sort of the spirit that Martin Luther met the devil with in a personal encounter. We don't have time to get into that. But there's an element of universality of the salvation that he offers every tribe and tongue and people and nation. So his message is for everyone. You don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to even be Gentile. His message is for any and all. And there's a universality. Now his blood, his atoning blood, is sufficient to accomplish the salvation of the world, but is only efficient for those who believe. And then we read of the prayer of the angels who hover around the throne and the living and creatures. There's actually 100 million angels, according to some translations, so we get a scope of how many demons are under the earth and on the earth right now. And also, in the 7th chapter, we read of the 144,000. We'll get to that when we get to that. We're going to do one on that soon. But these beings, these angels say, "Worthy is the Lamb, having been slain, to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and respect and esteem and blessing." So they're affirming and reiterating much of what the other crowd said. He is worthy because he has been slain, and because he has been slain and paid the ultimate price for our salvation, it is only right that he receive all the power and all the spiritual treasures and wisdom and everything else et al., etc. in the heaven. They all spring from him. Now in the 6th chapter, we read of the first of a 7-fold judgment. These seals are judgments, and these we also read of 7 trumpets spanning chapters 8 and 9, and 7 bowls beginning in chapter 16. And these are all figures of judgment. So this is an apocalyptic vision, meaning it's pertaining to the end times, the yet to be fulfilled and awaited for us future. And the first 4 of these seals are horses, and they are highly influenced by Zechariah's first chapter, the 7th through 17th verse. We recommend that you read that to inform what you read here. And you should be having a Bible every time you're watching these things. You should be going over and reading what I'm reading, and then when I'm saying what I'm saying, you could look over to that, Zechariah, pull that up to inform. But I'm going to get started with the opening verse of the 6th chapter. That being said, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying, like a sound of thunder, "Come and see." So the Lamb, who was worthy because he was slain for the sins of the world, he opens the seals. He's the only one who can do it. He's the only one who's worthy. And one of the 4 living creatures, he doesn't specify which one. It could be the lion, the ox, or the man, or the eagle, but it's one of them. And he says with an earth-shattering power of voice, that is sound of thunder, so really an echo and a boom. He has something to say. It's important, and what he says is, "Come and see." And the word "see" ties us. We have to be mindful of the words "see" and "look," because they are designations of the visionary component. So much of this revelation was a vision. He had a visual vision of what was going to come to pass. And the first of the seals, we read, and I looked and saw a white horse, and he who sat on it holding a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he who went out overcoming and to overcome. Now, the most common mistake is that one mistakes this horse-riding figure for the Lamb who opened it up. It is not the Messiah. It is not even the anti-Messiah. It is rather the spirit of conquest, we suggest. So he's a conqueror, and he's holding a bow that is a weapon, a bow and arrow. And he's a king. He's a conquering king with who goes out, and that's what he does. And the white is the source of the confusion, because often we read, such as we're going to read, that the martyrs were robed in white, and white is symbolic and emblematic and embodying and representative of purity and spotlessness. So a lot of the colors do have significances, and we'll elaborate on each one in the order they come of these horses. And when he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come and see." So once more, it's the same messenger and announcer. It's the second living creature. So that might be, in the order in which they are presented, is the lion. It's distinct from Ezekiel 1:10. John was highly influenced by the Old Testament visions, as we'll figure out more of. But it's the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle. So this one would have been the ox if it was in that order, but in any case, he doesn't specify. He just says the second living creature. It's another one. He says the same thing as the first one. He invites him to see what he's going to behold, because what he has to behold is something significant. And when he opened and another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was given to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that they should slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. So the red is symbolic, fiery red is symbolically of blood, and the rider is carrying this huge sword, which is specifically formed for the purpose of killing and destroying. And we can also suggest that if it's the horse-riding predecessor was of external conquest, this is of internal. And we read a lot of what portends to the anti-Messiah, who this is not exactly of, but it alludes to. He's going to come to power by being a peacemaker. He's going to squash the peace in the Middle East, and the whole world is going to be well for a 3.5-year period. Then things are not going to be so good. He's going to unleash the tribulation, the severest suffering and persecution, It's literally beyond description what the saints will have to go to, who live at the consummation of human history. But this is one to take peace from the earth. So he's going into a peaceful earth and making it violent, making it war, making it all the things that he came. He's carrying a sword, so he's killing people left and right as he's walking to and fro the earth. And when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." And I looked and saw a black horse, and he who sat on it holding a pair of scales in his hands. So we read the familiar order of operation, the third living creature that could have been the man if it was in the order in which they came, but he doesn't specify or identify, and he says the same thing, "Come and see." And what John looks and sees is a black horse. Black is representative of famine, so this is going to be one of the conditions of judgment. Famines are often divine judgments against iniquitous people, and it's going to come to pass in the end of the world, end of the age, and he has these scales, and we'll elaborate more fully because it makes more sense if we read the verse which comes after it. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, saying, "A measure of wheat for a denarii, and 3 measures of barley for a denarii, and do not harm the oil in the wines." So this horse is representative not only of famine, but of economic collapse, and this is going to be one of the conditions of the end time. With the famine comes a disequilibrium in the economic order. What once cost 1 is going to be increased 3-fold, but there are 2 things which the existence and distribution of will not be hindered. Those are oil and the wine. And oil means a lot of things. You can interpret this symbolically. It is the lubricant of anointment, the liquid which was poured on kings when they were anointed. It is also emblematic of the Ruach Kadesh, the Spirit. And the wine is, one thing it is likened to the word in that it stings initially, but there is a redemptive quality, a medicinal quality to the word. It is spiritual health and spiritual edification. But if we look at these more literally, the plants from which the wine comes, the grapes, and whatever one the oil comes, they are both deeply rooted, unlike the barley, unlike the wheat, which are, little figs and flays, but the analogy being that those who are deeply rooted will survive the tribulation. And they may have to pay their life for it, but they're not going to forsake the faith. They're going to survive with their faith intact, I should have qualified, because we're going to meet some of the martyrs. And martyrs are going to be piling up on the earth left and right before the Messiah comes, and this is the way it has to be. This is the way it is foreordained. We must accept that by faith. Verse 7, "And when he opened the 4th seal, I heard a voice of the 4th living creature saying, 'Come and see.'" Nothing new here. If it is the alphabetical order, I just want, it means eagle, but you don't need me to tell me that by now. It says the same thing. We've heard it before. "And I looked and saw a pale horse, and he who sat on it, the name was Death, and the grave followed with him. And an authority was given to him over 1/4 of the earth, to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and by the beast of the earth." So pale, the color pale, is emblematic of death. That's what it represents, and that has a ghost-like element. If you were to paint someone pale, it would mean they had a ghost-like element. They were no longer here. In death and hell, the Messiah is identified as the one who has the keys to death and the grave in Revelation 1:18. And if death afflicts the body, it comes to us. Hell torments the soul. So all must die, but hell, you don't have to end up there. But it travels with this horse riding figure, nevertheless, because a lot of people who kill, I hate to say it, they're going to go to hell, and he is authorized. This was given to him implicitly by the supreme sovereign source. So Satan and his minions cannot operate outside of the permission of the supreme sovereign will. He gives them license to do these things, and he's going to give him license to kill a quarter of the earth. But remember, there are limits to what can be destroyed, as we learned earlier. The tree from which oil comes, olive oil, and grapevines cannot be destroyed. Neither can 3/4 of the earth. But he's going to have multiple means of murder for the fourth of the earth that he is designated to slaughter, perhaps in mass genocide, kill with the sword and kill with hunger. And this takes us to Lamentations, where Jeremiah is complaining that that better to feel the sting of the sword than the stings of starvation. So he's envying the deaths of the ones who had died during the siege of the Babylons, and the ones who had left, they had to scraps for food. The mothers were literally eating their children. But that's a slightly different judgment than the one we're speaking of here. And so, they're just two means of murder and death, and by the beast of the earth. That means we're going to be at the mercy of carnivorous prey, mammalian creatures who can eat us alive and tear us apart. They're going to be unleashed by this force, this entity, which rides the fourth and final verse. Now we are told of 7 seals earlier. We only get to 6, not only in the chapter, but the one that comes after it. Spoiler alert, the 7th seal is the one of the second coming, and that has to consummate all the imperfect things which comes to pass. So 6 is evil. That is the number of the earth, and the anti-Messiah is going to be known by the number 666. No one knows quite what it means. Some people, humorously enough, thought it was Ronald Reagan, because Ronald Wilson Reagan, each name that he had 6 letters each, but history clearly invalidated that theory, because he's no longer with us, and the prophecy it is yet to come to pass. So it wasn't him, whoever it is. It's not going to, he hasn't come yet. Verse 9, we read of the 5th seal, and the first 4, we remember, were horses. These are slightly different. And when he opened the 5th seal, I saw under an altar the souls of those having been slain for the word of Yahweh and for the witness which they held. So he has a vision of dead martyrs, and there's going to be a lot of recent ones there. This may be historical martyrs. This may be the ones who died for the faith in the confession in his own generation and every generation since. It's not clear, but the Greek word martyr etymologically derives from witness, so the witness which they held. That's what made them martyrs. They were willing to die for their witness and testimony, and the truth that they lived by and swore by. They accepted by faith the resurrection. Most of the post-apostolic people couldn't see the event, but many are willing to die for it in every generation since. And the altar is typologically significant. Remember, John is highly informed and influenced by the Old Testament. So in the Old Testament, the altar would have been connected to the tabernacle, which would have made it the site and center where animal sacrifices were offered. So they had been offered, much as the Old Testament ones. They were sacrifices. They were sacrificed from sin rather than for sin, and they were not animals, obviously, but they were received as a sweet-smelling aroma, nevertheless, as are the prayers of the saints, likened to in the 8th verse in the preceding chapter. Verse 10, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Master, sacred and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? So they're awaiting out, and they're crying, and they're longing for vengeance, and the hour can't come soon enough. That is not to suggest that they're vengefully minded people. It is only to say that they went to the grave with the expectation that all injustices would be made just, all wrongs would be righted for the one whom they die for, and they're asking him in good faith. They do not doubt that he's not going to do it, but there's an expedient urgency to their prayer, and they want to know the answer. And there was given to each one a right robe, and they were told that they should rest a little while longer, until both their fellow servants and their brothers, who would be killed as they were, reached completion. So there's going to be more martyrs than just them who have to join them before they are liberated from paradise and exalted into the resurrection. So most of the dead people right now are awaiting the resurrection. There's a few exceptions, such as Moses and Elijah, who appeared in resurrected form at the transfiguration. But most of us are going to have to wait for this day to pass. We're going to spend time in paradise where without our bodies, without the resurrection, and it will be a state of rest, and that's where the martyrs find themselves in now. They are not yet exalted onto the resurrection, and before they do, these 4 horses, these plagues, have to kill all the martyrs that are going to be killed because of the necessity of the end times. But white robe, once more, is emblematic of divinity and purity. Verse 12, "And I looked when he opened the 6th seal, and saw a great earthquake came to be, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood." So there's going to be an abnormal natural activity, and this is one of the consequences. There will be famines, there will be pestilences, there will be earthquakes, there will be calamities and natural disasters as a portend, but this is at that specific moment when the great earthquake. Now, this is the first of 3 great earthquakes referenced throughout the book of Revelation. The other ones are in 11 and 13 and 16 and 18 and 19. You can look that up if you have your Bible handy, while I just connect this also to Joel 2:31. He connects it to the day of judgment, the day of Yahweh, when the sun becomes black and the moon becomes blood. So there's also 2 verses you can look up. I'm just going to read the 13th one, though. Or you can write these down on the margin of a notebook and look them up later. There's no one way of doing it. Verse 13, "And the stars of the heaven fell to the earth, as a fig drops its unripe figs, being shaken by a strong wind." Now, stars are massive entities, and they are beyond, our sun is not even a large star by the standards of average stars, and our planet dwarfs even other planets, many other planets. But they're going to be as feeble as these stars are going to fall to the earth as fig tree drops its unripe figs, and it's going to be liable and vulnerable to the shaking of the strong wind. This is connected to the abnormal, supernaturally induced natural activity of which we read of in the preceding verses and also in the Mount Olivet discourses for a more general reference of the end times. In verse 13, this is also the falling of the stars. It also bears mention, are one of these signs that are mentioned in Mark 13, 25, 26. You can look that one up while you're at it. "And the heavens departed like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place." So from this scroll, which was not completely unsealed, there was one 7-sealed, it was scrolled, but what happened to the earth was it was reduced to a scroll. It was rolled up as a scroll, and every mountain and island loses its own station and identity and place that they had in the 3-dimensional earth. They are now more or less 2-dimensional earth, compressed on a scroll. "And the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the rich ones, and the commanders, and the mighty, and every slave, and every free one, hid themselves in the caves, in the rocks of the mountains." So earlier we read the martyrs were praying for how long till the judgment comes, and then we read the most of the earth are begging for that. They're hiding from that judgment. So all the kings, all the exalted ones, all the wealthy, all the military leaders, and not only them, but every slave and every free person. So literally every person on the earth. This translation is gender neutral. The King James says men, but we can infer that children are not included in this. But they're all begging. They're running and trying to hide themselves in the caves, but you can run from the judgment, but you can never hope to hide it. So that just demonstrates their own abject folly. Verse 16, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him sitting on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. So they're actually begging for death. They're not just hiding out, but they're hiding because they know what's going to come to pass, and they just want to get this death over with rather than face the wrath of the Lamb. So the Lamb is a gentle creature in nature, as was the Messiah in his mortal ministry, but he's going to come back completely different, more conformed to the Jewish expectations of a mighty, in fact, omnipotent conqueror. He's not going to be like the one who came to the earth and the babe in the manger. He's going to come with wrath and righteous wrath in response to human iniquity and for the suffering of his saints in their hour of greatest need. And there's just one final verse, verse 17. Because the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? The only one who can withstand his wrath are those who are on the right side of his wrath, and the right side is also incidentally the covenant hand of authority. And in the parable of the sheeps and the goat, I believe the sheeps are on the right side of him, the goats are to the left. So the sheep will be able to withstand his wrath because it's not going to come in their direction. Anyone else, any living creature, any created being cannot endure the wrath once it is afflicted. No, it's an unsurvivable event. It is one you cannot escape and always one you deserve. So his wrath is reserved for people who deserve it. And the goal in life is to not deserve the wrath. I hope that's one of the reasons you're here. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to see you. See you soon. Take care until then. Bye-bye.